is now with great pleasure that I would like to call on Chairman Adesina, President of the African Development Bank, to make his remark. Mr. Chairman, please.
Thank you very much, CEO Alain Ebobese. Your Excellency, President Uhuru Kenyatta, the President of the Republic of Kenya, my dear friend and brother, Cabinet Secretary and Governor of the African Development Bank from Kenya, my dear brother Henry Rotich, Cabinet Secretaries and senior government officials from Kenya, honorable ministers, shareholders of Africa 50, ambassadors, board members of Africa 50, the Chief Executive Officer of Africa 50, Alain Ebobese, senior management and staff of Africa 50, members of the diplomatic corps, members of the press, distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the General Shareholders Meeting of Africa 50. Let me start by thanking you, Mr. President, Your Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta, for your generous invitation for us to host this General Shareholders Meeting right here in Kenya, and for personally gracing this opening ceremony, and for the excellent reception and facilities that you have made available to us. We cherish the usual very warm hospitality that Kenyans are known for. For me, it is especially heartening to be back here in Kenya, where I lived and worked for 10 years. And so, Mr. President, I am fully at home in Kenya. I wish to congratulate you, Mr. President, for your remarkable growth and development, and for the remarkable growth and development that Kenya continues to experience. I will be meeting you tomorrow as I start my official visit to Kenya as President of the African Development Bank. I will have a lot more time to discuss, but I would like to thank you for your kind invitation. There is a reason we all come to Kenya and never stop coming. Kenya is simply beautiful. Its people are warm and welcoming. Kenya has also been resilient. I wish to commend you and all Kenyans for the way and manner in which you manage the political environment with peace, mutual trust, and prayers, which have brought political stability to Kenya. Congratulations, Mr. President, for your amazing leadership that you have provided. Mr. President, you are one of the first African leaders to support the creation of Africa 50, which I am honored to chair. The African Development Bank, of which I am president, helped to create Africa 50 because we believe that new institutional models are needed to close Africa's huge infrastructure financing gap. Africa needs a lot more roads, rail, port, maritime, and air transport facilities, as well as greater levels of investment in water, sanitation, and energy to improve the quality of life of Africans. The African Development Bank's recent estimates show that Africa's infrastructure financing need is anything between $130 to $170 billion a year, with a financing gap of $68 to $108 billion. To drive industrialization, Africa must invest in industrial parks, logistics, infrastructure to drive competitiveness. The success of the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is expected to raise intra-regional trade from 15 to 52%, and also make intra-regional trade value to be about $35 billion a year, depends critically on accelerated investments in infrastructure. And the annual infrastructure investments in Africa from 2012 to 2016 have averaged just about $75 billion per year. The bulk of the investments in infrastructure are being done by national governments, and financing for infrastructure from national budgets has increased to over $26 billion annually. Yet, countries' needs are enormous. Kenya, for example, faces an infrastructure financing gap of $5 billion a year. Multilateral development banks and bilateral finance institutions have also been increasing support for infrastructure. That is why the African Development Bank is investing $12 billion in the energy sector alone through 2025, with the goal of helping to leverage $45 to $50 billion to close the financing gap in that particular sector. What is needed is to get the private sector to invest more in infrastructure. Private sector infrastructure financing in Africa is still low. averaging just about $6 billion per year, but this has dipped to $2.6 billion by 2016. Challenges facing private sector investments in infrastructure include lack of bankable projects, high cost of financing, weak regulations, lack of cost-reflective tariffs, low profitability, weak frameworks for public-private partnerships for infrastructure financing, and the slowness in which things get done. I must tell you, this morning, while we were waiting, I came in this morning, and President Kenyatta was supposed to be at the hotel for 11 o'clock. And he got there at about 10:25. And I think that if all African presidents move with the speed at which the president is moving, all infrastructure will be get done. Your Excellency, Mr. President, let me also say that Africa 50, we are very proud of Africa 50 at the African Development Bank. Africa 50's project development company is dedicated to helping to accelerate the development of bankable projects. Africa 50's project finance company is dedicated to deploying innovative financing, debt and equity instruments to finance infrastructure needs on the continent. With a new fully private sector window expected to be launched soon, Africa 50 will be able to offer very attractive market rates of return to private investors, especially institutional investors. We must all work smart to be able to attract greater financing from institutional investors to infrastructure in Africa. There exists today some $120 trillion of pools of saving globally that Africa must be able to attract into infrastructure. And that's why the African Development Bank, Mr. President, has launched the Africa Investment Forum, which we hope to use to be able to mobilize quite a lot of this pool of capital into Africa, especially in infrastructure. And we're delighted that that will be also something we are doing jointly with Africa 50, which will be holding 7th to 9th of November 2018 in Johannesburg. As I close, Mr. President, let me say that the African Development Bank will continue to support strongly Africa 50. In a relatively short period of time, led by Alan Ebobise, they've been able to become an important player in driving infrastructure investments with commercial rates of return in Africa. Mr. President, he has already gone through the projects. I will not try to repeat what he has said. But let me just simply close by saying that, Mr. President, Africa 50 has on its staff top-notch investment officers, supported by a first-rate board of directors with global experts in infrastructure, investment, and finance. Mr. President, with your continued strong support and the support of all the shareholder countries, I fully expect that Africa 50 will become a game changer in infrastructure financing. I therefore wish to encourage countries that have not yet become shareholders of Africa 50 to do so. By hosting this general shareholders meeting in Kenya, in a country that has continued to do a lot on investments in infrastructure, we will further get inspired to do more. Your Excellency, Mr. President, your personal leadership will continue to inspire us. I am proud to have presented to you, through your representative, the 2018 African Road Builders Award at the annual meetings of the African Development Bank held in May in South Korea. Since you were not there in person and I'm here, I would like to very warmly congratulate you for your remarkable leadership on infrastructure in Africa. With leaders like you, Mr. President, Africa will no doubt close its infrastructure financing gap, and Africa 50 and African Development Bank will be there together to help make this happen. Asante sana.